helpful. But I'm like, fuck, am I like mentally ill or do I have syphilis?
Well, I mean, you can ask them, like, is he mentally ill or does he have syphilis? Like,
Because I don't know, girl. Like, because you were like delusional thinking,
yeah,
psychosis.
mood swings.
And I was looking at you like, wait, why are you describing me?
Oh my God. So, but yeah, really, I will die on the hill that penicillin was probably one of the greatest inventions of humanity.
Hey, girly pop, welcome back to part 2 of this episode.
Hi, I'm Emily.
I'm Dean.
I hope you guys stayed tuned for the first one and learned some things along the way, because we're going to deep dive into STIs and how we can prevent them and we can treat them. So I'm excited. I know.
My brain was already on overwhelm from like all the information from the first time, like that, like Emily like was telling me all this like educational information, and now I'm like, let's get into it.
Let's deep dive, baby.
What is this? What are we sponsored by today?
What are we sponsored by? I'm trying to think. What is something? We can be sponsored by the Karma Sutra because it is fun to have sex.
Well, yeah, but it has gotten me no play.
It's okay.
It has gotten me nowhere.
It's okay. It's healthy. It's fine.
So,
all right, you want
continue.
You want to get me started?
Yes. Okay. So we are talking about well, we were talking about like the STIs, PrEP, and like all of that. Okay.
So this next portion is going to be about understanding the different types of STIs, how they're treated, how to prevent them, statistics on them, so that you can leave this podcast being a little bit more informed and you're getting medically correct information from trusted sources. And I've done a lot of research. I work in public health. I am more than qualified to speak on these matters. And what I want at the end of the day is for people to be more educated so that they can have healthier behaviors and they can take control of their bodily autonomy. So that way they can live a life that is truest to themselves. And that's freedom, essentially.
So what information are you going to be sharing today that like people are not going to be able to find online anymore? Because like we mentioned earlier in part 1 that like, like information was being taken down and like everything.
Well, definitely there's information about certain STIs that are more prevalent in certain communities like the LGBTQI plus community or transgender communities. You cannot find any of that information on the CDC as the word transgender is eradicated off that site. Yeah. Well, they were talking about taking women out of medical research, which I'm like, that's half the population. So there goes any kind of, medical research or progression for women, which is already, understudied anyway.
It's so crazy because like, what made me think of that was when like literally it was a Grey's Anatomy episode that just happened, and it was like Meredith trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, and then like a guy came in being like, well, I don't want to work with like female mice because they're more hormonal and it'll disrupt it. So she was like, you've been only studying male mice on Alzheimer's that affects mostly women.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, girl, why would you like, anyway.
Medicine, there's a huge gap between medicine that's studied in the context of a male perspective versus a female perspective. It's the research is astounding. There's just a lack of it. And it doesn't help that women are more affected by autoimmune conditions. There's a slew of things that affect women more prevalently than men. And it's largely not understood because the research and the time hasn't been put into it. But we are going to talk about things that hopefully everybody can walk away from the table being a little bit smarter about.
You're going to have these shit smart on that.
I'm going to be shit to the bottom of
shit to the boots.
Yes. And I want to make a disclaimer that this podcast is not to scare people about sex. I'm not like the scene from Mean Girls where the coach is like, don't have sex, you're going to get pregnant and die. And like everyone's looking panicked. Like this isn't to make you panic. This is just to make you more aware. Because my belief is the more educated you are, you have the ability to change your life. You can gain social mobility. You can get yourself out of cycles of poverty. You're able to, improve your life drastically. But that is why education is such a threat to a lot of institutions, because the smarter the population is, they're more in control of their life.
Why do you think he wants to dismantle the Department of Education so people will remain fucking stupid?
Yeah, they're trapped in cycles of poverty. They're trapped in cycles of not understanding things. If you can't critically think and you can't understand complex topics and you can't deduce, you're going to easier to control.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell fact from fiction because you can't critically think, nor do you have the ability to make decisions for your health and your safety and your wellness from a very educated approach. Like you'll follow in line. You won't question things. So that's why education is threatening.
Okay.
Threatening.
Move the hippo over here. I want to see some more.
Oh. Yes, I have a big old cheat sheet.
She has a whole sheet, which is like she came prepared.
Yes. So what I also want to do is I want to destigmatize a lot of STIs. STD is an old, outdated treatment. We don't call them sexually transmitted diseases. We call them sexually transmitted infections. It's just a little bit, it's a little bit less stigmatizing. And I think a lot of people have this notion of like, if you have an STI, you're dirty or you must be this really loose person. That's not true. You can get an STI in so many ways. You can get an STI in a monogamous relationship. If one person is acting unfaithful, like there are so many times that an STI can happen and you're blaming the party that maybe they didn't, consent to someone else being in the relationship. Like we can't sit there and stigmatize people and call them dirty and say these things, because a lot of it is rooted in misinformation and shame. And the last thing I want to do is to shame people. And I do want to address how common STIs are. They are so insanely prevalent, but there are ways to reduce the risk of getting an STI. And that includes, abstaining from any kind of sexual activity, which I'll get into later. I don't think that's realistic, and I'm not going to sit there and sit on that high horse. There's also having barrier methods like condoms. There are male condoms, female condoms, and there are dental dams, which if you've heard of dental dam, it's like this piece of like polyurethane you can put over your genital region, and then like it stimulates you still having oral sex without you actually touching their genitals. That's a barrier. That's considered a barrier method that can reduce the transmission of STIs.
Okay, you want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
I've actually never gotten an STI before.
That's great. That's amazing.
I've literally never gotten STI or STD. Like
that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
But I'm like, I don't want to be like 40 experiencing it for the first time.
This is what my OBGYN told me a long time ago. She said, and this is what I go forward thinking. She's like, Emily, because we were talking about this. So I'm like, how do I better educate people? And she's like, if you think of the mindset of potentially getting an STI is a risk you take when having sex, like other risks, having a pregnancy that's unplanned, getting an STI, that is a risk you take. Because everything in life, whether it's driving a car on the street, whether it's getting in an airplane, like whether it's having sex, especially if it's unprotected sex, you're running a risk. And like knowing that this could potentially happen to you, maybe you'll make better, healthier choices, or maybe you'll, use condoms, or you'll have those conversations with partners, or you'll start getting tested more frequently. Like these are things that we can do knowing this to make better behaviors and healthier behaviors going forward. And it is really important if you are somebody who has multiple sexual partners and, that is something that you're doing, or you are somebody who's maybe in a relationship that wants to make a relationship open, there's things like ethical non-monogamy, which I won't get into, but like polyamory, like there are times where, certain couples, it makes sense for them to have multiple physical connections with other people. You need to know your status, not
me. I would go insane.
Yeah. That I don't think it's for me personally. It's on my radar right now.
Well, why can't other people be happy for other people? Like, I am so happy for people who want to be in open relationships, like who are poly and stuff. But for me, I just can't. I personally know I'm insane. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. It requires a lot of communication. I mean, I don't think it's for me, but at this point in time, it's not even on the radar for me. But rule of thumb, and this is for everybody should be tested for STIs yearly. That includes people in committed, monogamous relationships.
Girl, you can figure out the cheating.
Yeah, you can figure out a lot of things. How did I magically get chlamydia? Like, magically? No, like, you would have gotten it from somewhere. And at some point, if the other person's denying it, like, this is going to open up more conversations. Certain STIs are going to be harder to figure out where you got it from. And I'll get into those later. Like, there are some that are going to be impossible to tell when you got it, unless you've only had one sexual partner in your whole life, or it's like, certain ones you could be like, wait a minute. So it's important to get tested yearly, at least. It's important to also get tested before you maybe get into a relationship. So after maybe you have a breakup, get tested, make sure you're clean before like you go out into the world and you explore other connections. But you should be getting tested 3 to 6 months if you are somebody who is having unprotected sex, if you have multiple sexual partners, and if you have a history of STIs. So maybe you tested positive for like gonorrhea a couple months ago, go back and get tested within 3 to 6 months. So like quarterly or semi-annually, you need to go back. It is important to get tested immediately if you have been exposed to, like, you have a partner and they have a call. They're like, hey, someone I know, I got it. There's an anonymous text line that you can do if you get an STI that you can almost contact trace, and you can send an anonymous text message to be like, someone that you've had sex with in the past X amount of time frame has tested positive for, gonorrhea, chlamydia, whatever. So that way they have it so it's more anonymous. So if you are approached by a sexual partner and they're like, hey, I got a text message from, the database that says that someone I had sex with might have, an STI, but I don't know if I have it yet, go get tested. Also, go get tested if your partner discloses to you that they have something. Like, hey, I know we had sex 2 months ago. Like, I have trick, or I have XYZ. Go get tested. And especially immediately go get tested if you have symptoms. So if you're having trouble, like if you're having trouble going to the bathroom or it's painful, if you're having itchiness, if you're having smelly or weird colored discharge, if you have new rashes on your genital region, if you have like new sores or lumps, like, go get tested immediately. And please, if you think you might have an STI, do not engage in sex with somebody else. And if you have to, for whatever reason, and you don't know, like maybe you go get tested on Monday and you're like, oh, well, I really want to go have sex with Susie on Thursday. Disclose it and wrap it up, please. Like, it takes a couple days for these tests to come out.
And I also feel like, isn't it like very uncomfortable to even like have like,
it's some of the symptoms of an STI are painful intercourse. Like that, if it's becoming painful, or for women, you're having like some bleeding, like that's not normal. Please go get tested.
Is all of this online?
Yeah, there's some of it online, but I have deeper research. And
well, no, that's what I'm saying. But I'm like, girl, this is a credible source. Yeah. But also, it's like, I need to know like what information is also like being taken off online too, I'm like,
yeah, some of it like it's more or less certain things with like certain demographics, are taken down, but I'll get into that. So yeah, so it's important, if you have tested positive for an STI, please go through all your treatment, make sure you take all your medication as prescribed, and do not have sex until you're completely cleared. Because, sometimes people forget to take their antibiotics and they can get antibiotic-resistant forms of these STIs. So, like, if someone gives you an antibiotic or someone gives you an antiviral or someone gives you medication, you need to take it, and then you need to go back to that clinic and get rechecked to make sure that it's cleared through. Also, I'm going to say this, and this is a plug for women or, transgendered females who are pregnant, or transgender males that are pregnant. Please go get prenatal care. Please go get prenatal care, and please go get STI tested. I don't care if you're married. I don't care if you're unmarried, because there are STIs that they can spread, through childbirth, or they can pass through the placenta, and you can infect your baby and they can be deadly. So it is so important. And this is what I talked about in the previous podcast. If you are somebody whose wife is pregnant and you are thinking about being unfaithful, or you're going to step out, you're running the risk of damaging your partner who's pregnant and your child. So think before you act.
Yeah, literally think before you act. But it's like, I literally put a video up today. I'm like, girl, literally men will find the time to cheat. If you don't have, if he's too busy, like,
He's-
you get what I mean? I'm like, he's not that busy. There are men out there with 2 families with kids and hiding them from each other and still finding time to like have an affair. So like, if he wanted to, he would.
And also, he better find time to go to the clinic and get tested. That's all I'm saying. Is if you have time to do that, you better go to
And if he doesn't have time to go to a clinic, he does.
And honestly, like, going to the clinic to be tested is not a scary thing. Healthcare providers are not there to shame you. They're not there to be mean to you. They're not there to say, naughty, naughty, boo, boo, you didn't wear a condom. You know, a lot of times healthcare providers are like, hey, I'm guilty of also not always being 100%, you know, safe with sex I'm having. Like, they're humans too.
Mm-hmm.
They're just there to help you and to coach you and to guide you and to ease your anxieties. So we're going to get into it now. So
what are we getting into?
We're going to get into the STIs. I'm excited. So there are 3 different types of STIs you can contract. There are bacterial.
Mm-hmm.
So those are your gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis. You have viral, which is your hepatitis B, which I'm going to plug a little bit. I'm not going to really get into hepatitis B, but hepatitis B, it is, you get it, you know, sometimes you can transmit it from, if your mother was infected with hep B, you get it from contaminated blood. And, you know, there's a vaccine that we give babies at birth to help prevent hepatitis B, because if you contract hepatitis B when you're a baby or a child, you have a higher risk of having the chronic form, which can actually cause you to go into liver failure or have liver cancer, and you might need a liver transplant. Like, you get sick. So that's why people are like, why do I need a hepatitis B vaccine for my baby? It's like, okay, yes, but you don't want your baby to not be vaccinated, get hepatitis B later in life, and now your grandchild has liver failure. Like, these kids are sick.
Yeah.
Like, sick. And also, a lot of times with hepatitis, it's a very insidious illness. You won't know that you're sick for a long time, but your liver is slowly failing. And then all of a sudden you're
lose symptoms.
You actually start noticing issues, like you're bruising more, you get a yellow tint to your skin, you're fatigued, you just feel like overall kind of shitty. And you're like, why am I not myself? It's, you know, your liver's failing. And because your liver is responsible for clearing out toxins and actually does a lot with like your blood and clotting factors. So you're at high risk for like cirrhosis, cancer, and needing a transplant. So yeah. So I didn't want to get too far into it because hepatitis B can be spread through sex, can be spread through needle sharing and other things like that. But the little plug, there's a vaccine. Vaccinate your kids. Other viruses are HPV, HSV 1 and 2, which is herpes, and Mpox, which is monkeypox. These call it Mpox. And then, of course, HIV and AIDS. And then our parasite. There's parasites you can have. This one, it always trips me up. It's called trichomoniasis. Trichomoniasis, which I'll call it Trich. So we'll start with Trich. Trich was very interesting to research. Trich is the most common non-viral STI in the world. More common than chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis. It's Trich. Right. I did.
What in the what?
What in the what?
I've literally never heard of that.
It's a parasite. So it's like a little like parasitic.
What does it do?
I'll get into it. So the reason why Trich is very tricky, Trich is tricky because a lot of people, like up to 70%, are not really symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
And it does affect women more than men in terms of symptoms. So have you heard the trope, like, you listen on Cult 45 by Afro Man? How he's like, I was blind. I was walking by a blind man who went in the fish market. And he's like, good morning, ladies. Like that joke about like women having fishy smelling vaginas. If you have a fishy smelling vagina, that is a telltale sign that you might have trichomoniasis. That is. So men joking about women with fishy vaginas, or like you're noticing like a weird odor, that coupled with like greenish yellow thin discharge, please go to the clinic.
What about men?
Men can have it too. I don't think it's as fishy. It's just the nature of like women's reproductive organs being a little bit more like it's a dark cavern in there. You're gonna, you know, a lot of times men will carry these STIs asymptomatically or have very little symptoms, and women get in and they're like, whoa, what's going on? Because there's a lot of things that happen with vaginas even monthly. So how it's diagnosed essentially is for women. Mm-hmm. Women will go, they'll do a vaginal swab, and they'll look under the microscope. And at that time, when you're looking for trichomoniasis, you can also be diagnosed with yeast infection, bacterial vaginosis, or Trich, which BV is common. It just means you have an overgrowth of bacteria that normally exists, because there is bacteria that exists in a woman's reproductive tract. That's natural. And then you have like yeast infections, which are insanely common, and then you can have Trich. For men, they just pee in a cup. It's a lot easier for men. They just kind of pee. And then they can diagnose it. So luckily, trick is actually easy to treat. You take an antibiotic, you get it over with, wrap it up, tell your partners you had trick, and then you move on. So trick is its most common non-viral, but it's extremely easy to treat. I know.
I've literally never heard of that before.
So yes, now we're going to go into bacterial ones. So I'm going to lump gonorrhea and chlamydia together because they present like symptom-wise, they present similarly, but oftentimes gonorrhea and chlamydia are very sneaky because a lot of people do not present with symptoms.
They're so prevalent, though.
They're prevalent. So a lot of people are asymptomatic, but they still have it. And, it's problematic because it can lead to a lot of long-term health complications. So if you're not, you might have gonorrhea and chlamydia. If you're not getting tested frequently, you could be living with gonorrhea and chlamydia for a long time. It gets particularly dangerous for women. So these infections can leave the vagina, go into your uterus. It can go up into your fallopian tubes and your ovaries, and it can cause like a reproductive whole system infection. And you can get what's called pelvic inflammatory disease, which it's painful. Like essentially your whole pelvis and organs they're inflamed and they're infected. It's painful. That can lead to scarring in your like fallopian tubes in your uterus, which can cause you to become infertile. And then it increases your risk of having ectopic pregnancy.
Oh, yeah. I actually do know what that is because I had a friend in high school who had that.
So dangerous. So for people that don't know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's kind of like a hot topic because it gets tricky with women and like abortions and, it's a medical emergency. So what ends up happening in an ectopic pregnancy is the sperm fertilizes the egg. You have what's called conception, and then the egg should travel down into the uterus, implant into the uterus, and then it grows from the uterine lining, that's what you need to healthfully have a pregnancy. That has all the nutrients. That's where the placenta goes. If the tubes are blocked, or somehow, some way, the egg gets stuck and lashes onto the fallopian tube wall, your cells will still divide. You have had conception, cells divide as they do. Unfortunately, that is not the space where you can grow a fetus, and you run the risk of rupturing your tube, bleeding internally, or having a septic infection because that is not meant to be there. So it is a medical emergency. And that's why it is very important if you are engaging in sex, please go get tested because you can actually spread it to your baby through the birth canal. Just get tested, please. It actually, in men and women, can cause reactive arthritis. You can get joint pain from chlamydia and gonorrhea. So if you're starting to feel like weird down there and your joints hurt, that's a sign that you may also have it. Yeah. So.
Wait, I feel like it's the most common one, right? It's
nope.
the most
No, it's not. I'll blow your mind later. It's not the most common. No.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so how?
It's common.
Why does gonorrhea sound like? Well, it sounds like diarrhea, but
yeah. It's bacterial infection. So it's really important that obviously you go get tested. The way that it's diagnosed is you can swab. So even if you come in like you're like, hey, I've had unprotected sex and my throat kind of hurts, you can swab the back of your throat. For people that engage in anal sex, they'll swab your anus. And then they actually can detect it in blood, which is not so much common. They'll mainly have you pee in a cup. So that's how you diagnose it. So culture swabs that are then sent to the lab, or you urinate in a cup. And it's really important to please take all your antibiotics, and then 3 to 6 months, go back, make sure it's cleared, and then go on your merry way. And tell people, please contact trace, do the anonymous hotline, say, hey, so if disclosure is going to be embarrassing, or if you have many partners and you're like, I don't even know where to start, that way, that you can do it anonymously, and hopefully they, in good faith, then go to the clinic and they tell their partners, and then, everyone's protected in that situation. Yeah, so there's that one.
Wow.
And then, okay, so the last bacterial infection, this one's going to blow your mind. It's syphilis, and it's a doozy. This one's a doozy. So,
what is that one?
So syphilis is bacterial, and it is well documented throughout history. Many people have had syphilis. So it's bacterial infection. What ends up happening is, you have sex with someone, they have syphilis, And you get about 3 weeks afterwards, you get what's called it's called a chancre. So it's this painless like sore. You get it somewhere like in your genital region. Sometimes you don't know you have it. They can be in tricky spots. They can be mistaken for an ingrown hair. Sometimes they're mistaken for maybe like herpes or mistaken for a rash, and it's painless. So you're infected with syphilis. You have the sore. The body's processing it out. Syphilis comes in 3 stages. 3 stages. So first stage, you get the sore. Second stage, the sore starts to heal, but now you're contagious, and where your sore was, you will develop sometimes, a rash, and it's not itchy. It's like a reddish brown, at the site where the sore was. This can be really hard to tell, especially if you have higher pigmentation in your skin. Like certain ethnicities, it's harder to tell in. If you have it kind of in a weird spot, you might not know. But it's not usually until you start noticing a rash on your hands. You can get on your feet, you can get on your chest. Like this rash starts to spread, and
Crazy.
you're now contagious. And some people get symptomatic, meaning they feel almost as if they have the flu. So they're run down, they're tired. Some people start to have hair loss, like your hair starts to fall out a little bit. You can have muscle aches, you can have discomfort, like you're not feeling well. But it's important, if you are at this stage of syphilis, you need to go get tested, because syphilis can lay dormant, like it's in your body now, and you can have like flare-ups of your symptoms. You need to get this antibiotic and you need to clear it out, just not only to stop the spread of it. You can have what's called tertiary or late stage syphilis. Syphilis can spread to your eyes. It can cause you to go blind. It can spread to your heart. It can cause you to have heart failure. It can spread to your spine. I mean, it can essentially, and your brain. It can kill you.
Girl,
what? Yes, this is why testing is important. So
I'm gonna get tested, but still, I'm shook. That should compare.
I don't think paralyzing, but it can cause you to have heart conditions. It can cause you to go blind. And when it spreads to your brain, neurosyphilis is crazy. It actually causes people to have psychosis, hallucinations, delusional thinking. It can cause erratic mood swings. No. It could cause erratic mood swings. Like it can cause people to start acting really out of pocket. And it's well documented that a lot of like monarchs and Roman emperors, they had syphilis. And when they started getting like progressively crazier, it was because they had this tertiary syphilis that had been in their body for so long. And actually, there's theories that Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, in World War II, had syphilis.
They were not having sex.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, back then. So what's funny about, this World War II time period is that if it wasn't for the invention of penicillin, we would have, first of all, we wouldn't have any flipping antibiotics to begin with. But penicillin was founded during World War II. That treats syphilis. So yes. So when they found this, they were able to help, because these venereal, they call them venereal diseases. That's also an old school term. Getting like syphilis and chlamydia and gonorrhea, that was one of the main reasons why a lot of troops in World War I and World War II were out of commission. They were literally in the med tent because they're like, hey, like we have syphilis. And they're like, well, fuck, you can't fight then. Like you're sick. So when penicillin came around, they were like, hey boys, in addition to wearing condoms, here's some penicillin. So they were able to get through to war.
I just didn't know that you could have it could stay in your body.
Yeah. Because you're not fighting the infection. So if you think about it, like
I thought your body did it naturally.
No, syphilis, that can stay in your body, babe. It can stay in your body.
Oh girl.
Wow. Yeah. So the way syphilis is diagnosed is, they take your blood.
Girl, now I don't. Okay, fuck. You telling me this information. I mean, no, I'm grateful, but I'm like, fuck. Am I like mentally ill or do I have syphilis?
Well, I mean, you can ask them, like, is he mentally ill or does he have syphilis? Like,
I don't know, girl. Like, because you were like delusional thinking, psychosis,
mood swings,
and I was looking at you like, wait, why are you discovering?
Oh my god. So, but yeah, really, I will die on the hill that penicillin was probably one of the greatest inventions of humanity, because we've been able, it really is. And speaking of that, I know it's a lot like doom and gloom and fear and scary stuff. With modern medicine comes advancements. So they have found that and this is primarily tested in men who engage in sexual activity with other men, not so much women, because of course women never get good cohort studies, that there is a kind of a preventative treatment that helps reduce the risk of contracting syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. And that is this like doxy PEP. So it's 200 milligrams of doxycycline. You can take this within 72 hours of unprotected sex. And it has been found that it is over 70% effective in reducing your risk of contracting chlamydia and syphilis, and about 50% for gonorrhea. So, yeah. So
it's different from PrEP, though.
Yeah. PrEP is more or less for HIV prevention, and then PEP, doxy PEP, is for the bacterial STIs.
I always thought it was like just another name for it.
Yeah. No, they're two different things. That's what I thought too.
So like the thing is, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they like came up with more of like different types of PrEP, because I remember at like the first version that I took, I was like, I'm not taking this, because I took it and I like started getting a bunch of weight. And I was like,
yeah. Well, doxycycline, it's important to know. Also, doxycycline is really hard on your stomach. So please, if you are taking this, you need to eat. Thank you. Please eat. So, yeah. So it's very, it make you sick. You can make you throw up. So, yeah, there's certain things like certain antibiotics, like taking a bunch of magnesium supplements and like coconut water, it reduces the effectiveness of your antibiotics. So it's important when you get antibiotics, you take them as affected, and then read what they counteract with. And then, because you don't want to get a drug resistant form of these, diseases, because then you're taking, essentially antibiotics for long periods of time, which is not good. That can lead you.
Antibiotics are like, apparently it's like very bad for your digestion. Well, for me, because I'm like, I feel like every time like any antibiotic, it messes up with like my metabolism and stuff.
Yeah, so, but it's better than having,
Yeah, it's better than eating.
Yeah, risk reward. Metabolism can go a wayside for the wild. You have to clear your STIs. Yeah, more important, because it can lead to long-term infertility problems and health.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
On what? Let's go.
Okay, so our last segment is
last segment.
Well, not last segment, but our last type. You okay?
Oh yeah, I'm good.
Our last form of STIs are viral, and so there's a couple that we're going to go over. But the first one I want to talk about is it's called HPV, which is human papillomavirus. I'm sure you've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Yes. So HPV is the #1 most common STI in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is estimated that every single person who is sexually active will contract it at least once in their lifetime. Yes. This is due and a lot of times you don't know that you have it, though. This is due in part, though, that there are over 200 strands of this virus. And
200 strands. Like
200 strands.
So like it's kind of like in COVID where it's like multiple different types of like strains?
Yes, it's strains. It's different types. So viruses are extremely effective in surviving because they will constantly mutate their DNA. They will splice and dice. They will come up with like some other like weird version of themselves, and their whole point is to survive. So they're mutating their DNA. What makes HPV so what makes HPV tricky in its sense is a lot of times you don't know that you have it. And in 90% of cases, that aren't like the genital warts or the cancer-causing forms of HPV, which we'll get into in a second, like 90% of the time you will clear the virus naturally. Your body will get rid of it. However, there are certain cases where, if essentially this is women getting pap smears, they'll notice that their cells are becoming abnormal. If you cannot clear HPV and it's like 1 to 2 years in and you still have it, you have to get it burned out. There's a procedure for that. So HPV can be extremely dangerous for everybody, but especially for women. And if you're not,
is it every single test, or is it just like you have to order it specifically to
you have to order it specifically. So, a lot of times HPV, it's not always genital wart causing or cancer causing. Sometimes they're just strands and the body clears them. However, there are some strands that they can lead to cancer, and the places where cancer is the most prevalent are cervix, vagina, your vulva.
Mm-hmm.
You can get anal cancer, you can get penile cancer, and you can get actually mouth and throat. Yeah, so that's a big one. So mouth and throat cancer from HPV. is huge. So, it is really important, like I said, for people, if you have like new warts, gets those tested, or like women getting their, pap smears and checking for these forms of HPV, because in 15 to 20 years, you can get full-blown cervical cancer. And it's, you're undergoing chemo. It can be pretty deadly. However, once again, plug for vaccination. There is a vaccine. It's called Gardasil. It has been proven to be effective when you give us vaccine in your adolescent years before you are engaging in sexual activity, that this vaccine can prevent against the cancer-causing strains of HPV. So you essentially have a cancer prevention vaccine. And you give it boys and girls. Everybody should get it. And then some of them are the genital warts too.
Wait, I think I remember there was like this thing where like they were requiring us to get it.
Yeah, that's right. Cancer prevention. Because those are the strands that will cause those things. So you're preventing giving your partner a cancer-causing form of...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, wait, I had no idea. Well, I mean, I did have, because they always required it in New York. Like, they had like this whole thing where they were like, you need to do this or you can't come to school.
Yeah.
Or like,
it's like getting a meningococcal. Yeah. So yeah, essentially, HPV, this virus is causing your healthy cells to replicate incorrectly, and then they, overgrow with all of these genetic mutations, and then the cells are no longer healthy. They either like divide uncontrollably, or it's damaged DNA, and then which leads to cancer. So that's why it's important, preventatively giving these to your children. I know there's a big push against vaccines, but like essentially you could potentially prevent your child from getting cancer down the line. So, how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm like, the reason why that we've lived so long is because of like all this shit. It's like it's medicine, but also it's like, sometimes it's better to be like, I would never understand people who's like, oh, I'm trying to do like better for my kids because like I don't want them to get the vaccine. I'm like, babe, what do you think is gonna happen when they go into the world? They're gonna just be in a bubble?
No.
Like, do you get what I mean? Like, y'all are insane. But anyway.
All right. This next one. This one's everyone's favorite. HSV1 and HSV2, which is herpes. We're gonna break this down. Herpes in particular, very stigmatized, very misunderstood. I'm going to blow your mind with statistics. I really am.
Yeah, okay. That's the statistics.
So herpes simplex 1, herpes simplex 2, that is the herp, everyone calls it that, is actually related to, it's in the same herpes family as herpes zoster, which is your chickenpox and your shingles. So they are like cousins of each other.
Whoa.
Yeah, they're cousins. So the reason why, if we think about chickenpox, prior to vaccination, people would have like chickenpox parties, and like their kids would get, they're like, let's get the chickenpox out of the way. Okay, first of all, I don't recommend doing that. But what they did not realize is that chickenpox, even though you're exposed to the virus, you get sick, you get better, you now have that herpes zoster in like essentially in your nerve cells. And shingles is directly associated to chickenpox because that is the activated form of chickenpox that a lot of elderly people get later in life, and that's why it's painful. It is essentially the dormant form of your chickenpox reactivated into a painful, zinging nerve rash on your face and your body. Yes. So,
girl, what are all these like things doing dormant? Like,
yeah. Well, that's why herpes, because it is cousins to chickenpox, and chickenpox live in your system, that's the same thing with herpes, of how it gets activated. So herpes, once you're exposed to it, you live with it.
Yeah.
So there's two forms of herpes simplex. You have herpes simplex 1, which are cold sores, essentially. They're oral form of herpes. And 50% of the population, global, has it. 50%. You mainly get it in childhood, whether you have someone who has HSV1, like someone kisses on a baby, gives it to a baby that way, or, a baby gets it from their mom, mom's kissing on baby, mom has history of cold sores, baby goes to daycare, puts a toy in their mouth, another kid picks it up, because kids put shit in their mouths all the time. So you mainly contract HSV1 in childhood.
Excuse me, 50%?
50%, babe. 50% of the world has HSV1, and that's cold sores. So
I'm like still,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, my eyes are like, like
Oh, it gets
on that
better.
right now. You're like, you're like looking at me, and I'm like,
Yeah. 50%.
oh, we should get it.
So 50% of the world has it. What the cold sores, if you've seen them, the burrito commercials and things like that. Some people get one cold sore in their life. They never get one again. Some people get cold sores when the weather gets cold and their lips are chapped or they're stressed or they have an infection. Like there's no way to tell whose HSV1 is going to flare up when. Some people just get them out of the blue. Some people never. Some people have HSV1, they carry it, they never have an outbreak at all. But you are the most contagious to spread HSV1 to other people when you have an active cold sore. So it is very important if you have a cold sore or you think you have a cold sore, do not kiss somebody and do not perform oral sex because HSV1 can transfer to your genital area.
Wait, but like it never goes away. You said it just like
it just lays dormant. You've had exposure to it. It lays in your nerve cells and it can be reactivated at any time. So most people, if you have a history of cold sores in your life, you take your blood, you are HSV1 positive. Yes. Oh, it gets better. So this is going to go into HSV2. And HSV2 is traditionally genital herpes.
oh dear.
Do you want
like crabs?
No, crabs pubic lice.
Oh, I'm bad.
No. HSV2 is genital herpes, and that is, you hear people have like lesions and like painful sores. I want you to guess statistically how many people globally have HSV2?
Globally, I feel like maybe, well, now the other numbers scared me. I'm like, maybe like 45% have HSV2.
1 in 6. 1 in 6 people. So I think that translates to like maybe less than 20%. However, the thing with HSV2 is what gets really tricky about it is a lot of times people carry it, they have it, and they don't know that they're carrying it. They don't.
Oh dear.
So,
well, even if because you said it's a different type of like exam, well, not exam, but like test you have to take.
Yeah. I'll get into it. Let me get into it. I'll tell you. So, usually what happens is you become aware that you have been exposed to genital herpes. It's called your initial outbreak, and that is marked with painful like lesions, like blisters. Apparently your first outbreak is the most painful. It's painful, it hurts. And you go to the doctor, you're like, I don't know if I have UTI, everything's painful down there. What they'll do is they'll look at them and say, hey, I'm noticing you're having like a rash or you're having these blisters. So the way that they test for it is they pop open your blister, they take a sample of the fluid, they send it to the lab, and then they can take your blood. So the fluid will tell you, is this herpes or is this like shingles? Do you somehow have shingles or something else like in your genital area? Mm-hmm. It'll say like, do you have herpes? What kind of herpes? XYZ. And then they take your blood because your blood will then be indicative of, is this a new infection? Have you had exposure to this, recently? Or have you had exposure more than 30 days ago? Has this just been living in your system, dormant, not popping up, and this isn't its first exposure? So that's why it can be tricky. So there's a lot of people who, if you took their blood, they would have the long-term antibodies to HSV2, but they're sitting there because they've never had an outbreak. They don't know that they're living with HSV2. They've just been asymptomatic. So that's why it's very stigmatized, because there's a lot of people casting judgment, throwing stones, and if you took their blood, they would have a real reckoning because they don't know. And it's not in a standard blood test the way that HIV and syphilis is.
Well, that's what I was asking earlier.
No, you have to be symptomatic. You have to be, because it looks at your they call it like antibodies and your immunoglobulin, which is part of your immune system. It'll check that. So
like what is actively trying to fight?
Yes. So, yes, I guess you could request it, but like I wish that they by and large tested people more, because I think we'd have probably more of an updated statistic on that. So yeah, and there are some people, they get one genital herpes outbreak in their life. They never have one ever again. But there are people that maybe monthly they have recurrent ones, or, women on their menstrual cycles that can trigger it, or a viral illness or stress. And those people are, ones that tend to take like the antivirals or the Valtrex to kind of help not only eliminate the symptoms of the discomfort, but to shorten their their time that they are contagious. Because you are the most contagious when you have a lesion and you're engaging in unprotected sex. So it's quite common. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, if people knew the statistic, maybe, they'd
That's crazy. Well, I'm shocked.
shocked.
I'm shook.
Shook to your marrow, babe.
I don't, oh my God,
So also, this is important for women. If you are pregnant, you had HSV 1 or 2, you're going to get a C-section. You'll get a C-section, period. So it's just because you can pass it to your baby as you're delivering, and it can cause brain damage.
So if there's one thing that you want people to take away from that, the whole spiel of that, it's obviously yes, get tested and stuff. But what?
Get tested and don't be so judgmental when someone says that they disclose that they had HSV 1 or 2 with you, because 1 in 6 people has it. There's a chance you have it too. There's a good chance. Yes.
Yeah, because I feel there's stigma on anything, the STIs, the CDs, whatever. Let's be compassionate, yes. Empathetic. Okay.
All right. Yeah. And then our next one is Mpox or monkeypox.
Oh, yeah.
There was a huge outbreak in 2022, if you remember. Monkeypox, I learned this was interesting, is actually related to smallpox, which was the big illness that eradicated a lot of indigenous people. And to no one's surprise, Christopher Columbus, he actually had syphilis.
Of course.
Of course he did. Are we shocked that Christopher Columbus had syphilis? Yeah, no. They were responsible for eradicating, indigenous people through illness. So monkeypox, typically it starts, you start with flu-like symptoms, you don't feel good, and then you start developing a spotted flat rash. You can get it anywhere in your body, your hands, your feet, your chest, your face. Eventually that spotted rash will turn into pus-filled blisters, and that's when you're really contagious, is when you have the blisters, and you can get it from contact, touching somebody with that pus-filled blister, gets in your skin, engaging in sexual activity with people that have blisters. If you're itching, if you're painful and you're itching, you can spread it that way. But luckily, this whole virus was kind of taken down due to the fact that it disproportionately affected LGBTQI plus communities. There is a 2-step vaccine. You can be vaccinated against this. So if you are somebody who engages with sexual activities, maybe men with men or transgendered people, just get the vaccine. Yeah. You can get rid of it, eradicate it, protect yourself, protect others.
Girl, when the vaccine hit, I got him.
As you should. I'm so proud of you.
It's there's no way that was going to happen, because I was
I'm proud of you.
But,
we're almost done.
Well, what's the next thing? Because I'm I was girl,
I know.
The girly pops are going to be let's do a part 3.
Yeah. No, the last thing is I'm just going to end this with HIV and AIDS and just kind of explain. HSV and AIDS, we're going to circle back to the beginning. So, HIV is a viral illness. It is contracted through bodily fluid. That includes blood, semen, vaginal fluid, breast milk. Not so much saliva, not so much tears. In very rare cases it can, but it's usually semen, vaginal fluid, blood, and breast milk. And you can pass it on to your baby if you're pregnant, and it can cross the placental barrier. So what this virus does is it essentially attacks your T cells in your immune system. And what your T cells do is they're the ones that are kind of they signal the horn that there is an infection. We have an infection. They'll send out the other parts of the immune system to fight it. So HIV directly attacks these cells, and it lowers your body's defense. And a lot of times when you first have HIV, your symptoms are very much like other viruses. You run down, you feel like shit. You're I'm tired, I'm achy, and you don't realize is it the flu or is it HIV? And no one's thinking initially it's HIV. They're I have the flu, I have the cold. So it can stay in your body for a while before you are aware that you have it. So which is why getting tested is good, especially in winter seasons when it's viral season and everyone feels like crap. It's just, if you're having sex, get tested. And it's not until your T cells hit a threshold of less than 200 count is when you get diagnosed with AIDS. So it's all based on your T cells in your blood, determine are you HIV or do you have AIDS. So the reason why a lot of people die of quote unquote AIDS, they die from complications, meaning they're dying from the fact that their body no longer can fight off a pneumonia. Yeah. They can't fight off simple things like a common cold, the flu, because you just have an immune system left.
Wait, so I feel that's the knowledge that people do know, but what about, I feel I want to bring up we met people who are like, oh, I'm HIV
That's what I'm going to get into.
positive,
Yes, I'm going to get into that. That was actually my segue, good one. So if you are somebody who is HIV positive, you take, it's called ART. It's, I think, antiretroviral therapy. So you take a daily pill. And what this does is it actually lowers the amount of virus in your body. You still, yes, you will always have HIV, just like you will always have herpes. You will always have HIV. It lowers your amount of virus in your body to a point that is undetectable, meaning you're not going to transmit it as easily to another partner. So you can live your whole life with HIV, but be non-detectable, meaning that your medication is working and you're not transmitting it to sexual partners. So that's,
people are so scared of that.
They're scared, but that's why when we're rolling back all of these HIV treatment programs, we're making people that were non-detectable detectable now. So that's why, it's important that these institutions that are providing these public goods stay open and stay well funded, because you're preventing communicable disease. Wow. So that's when they say I'm undetectable. Yes, I had HIV. I've come in contact with a partner. And also, the same goes with herpes, because it can lay dormant in your body for a long time. Unless you are only with one sexual partner, you have no idea where you got that herpes. You don't. You clearly don't. If you're having unprotected sex with multiple people, you don't know where you got it. It's a hodgepodge. Same with HIV. You don't know where you got this. So unless you've only had sex with one person and that's it. Which, good for people that do that. That's not, I can't sit there and claim to only do that. That's not realistic with the way statistics run. But, also in addition to people who have, HIV becoming undetectable, you have now, what you can do is take what's called your PrEP, which helps prevent you from getting HIV before you have sex with a partner, not knowing their status. So that's what people will take. Like, I'm taking my PrEP, I'm taking it to reduce my risk of transmitting it. So that's where that PrEP comes from. Wow. It kind of boosters, Yes. Yeah. And there is one thing, I want to end with. I do want to end with this little statement is that, I always wonder, this is almost like a sex ed class. It is unrealistic for me to say that abstinence is the only way. Abstinence is the only surefire way to not, get an STI, pregnancy, and things like that. But statistically speaking, people engage in sex, average at the age of 17. So people are having sex. Half the teenagers in the country are having sex. And if you're going to have sex, your average age is 17 for your first sexual encounter. There are only 5 states in the United States that require they do not require mandatory sexual education. So all the rest of 45 states say you have to have something. 5 states do not require it. And it is no coincidence that 4 out of those 5 states have the highest rates in teenage pregnancy and the highest rates in STIs. And can you guess what those states are?
No.
Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas. Yeah. And it is no question, no surprise that those states lean red in their leadership. And it is no surprise that they also rank lowest in education. They rank highest in teen pregnancy, STIs. They rank highest in poverty. And they rank highest in adverse health outcomes, especially for people of color and LGBTQI+, because these people are sicker, they're trapped in cycles of poverty, and they have leadership that intentionally is suppressing that. So that's why it's important for people to get factual information so that you guys can make safe choices, because the United States, compared to the rest of the world, has the worst rates in teen pregnancy and STIs, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
I think those things have been educated more.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, as long as people know what, they can do themselves, then, you're giving their power back to, for them to make a decision. I mean, later on, they're not like, oh my God, scared. Because they're like, you know what? No, I actually made the choice to go into this. Let's say, knowing that they didn't get tested and I didn't get, it's like, but then when you're uninformed, you go in, you're like,
clutching your pearls. Yeah, clutching your pearls.
What do you, what are you surprised about? But
did you learn a lot, babe?
My brain does that. It's so full. But wait, I think there's so much more though.
I know. Well, we can do that in another podcast. We're already.
Let us know let Emily know, girl, if you want her to do or us to do more of these episodes. But Hope you enjoyed part 2. I know I did because I'm like sitting right here and I'm like, I've already like, girl, I learned so much. But yeah, kudos. So if you have any questions, make sure to DM us and you can find us on Instagram. My name is Dean.
And I'm Emily.
And we will see you next week with a new episode. And make sure to send us your stories, your questions, your voicemail, and any future topics you want us to talk about.
Absolutely. Stay safe, stay healthy, go get tested.
Happy April, girly pop. Mwah.